So good morning or good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. If you're joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And I must say, one of my favorite parts of this job is watching speakers and students just grooving like mad when that 30-second countdown comes on. So thank you guys for continuing that trend for me down below on my screen. This is our first week back, and so a huge thank you to all you teachers that have joined us in the last 2 years for coming back. Last year, we hosted 550 programs in one of the weirdest years for teachers of all time, and so we so appreciate your efforts to join us, showcasing such amazing people and places around the globe. I know for many of you, your students are back in the class for the very first week in over a year, so welcome back to students. It's so cool to have you kids back in the classroom, and I hope we've got a really great presentation for you today. Now, before we dive in, I just wanted to introduce our speaker. We're going on a bit of a special tour today on a topic that I've wanted to have much more of it exploring by the seat of your pants for years, and that is fossils and dinosaurs in this ancient world. The world as we know it now is just a small, I guess, glimpse at something that has been a 3.5+ billion year history of life on this planet. And we are going to go on a fossil journey today with Gabriel Santos. Gabriel is awesome. He is a museum educator, outreach coordinator. He is the founder of Cosplay for Science. He's a Grosvenor Teacher Fellow with National Geographic. Basically, everything he does, he gets all sorts of amazing accolades for because he is the very best at it. And it is such a pleasure and privilege for me to be able to introduce him to you today. Gabriel, thank you so much for joining us today, man. And let's go on that tour together to the Alf Museum of Paleontology and all the cool stuff you get to do.
Oh, thanks, Jesse. That was such a cool opening. I was grooving along too. That's really good music. I might ask you where that came from. So, like Jesse said, my name is Gabriel Santos. I am a paleontologist and educator here at the Raymond Alf Museum of Paleontology in Claremont, California, just right outside Los Angeles. And today I'm going to show you a little bit about what we do here at the museum, take you on a journey through time with fossils, and talk a little bit about what paleontologists do. So first things first, I'm going to take you through a virtual tour of our virtual museum. So here we are in the Alf Museum. We created this virtual tour right at the start of last year because unfortunately we have to close along with many other museums. But thanks to one of our amazing volunteers, we're able to create this really cool virtual museum that anyone can visit from their classroom, from their home, wherever you feel like taking a tour through time. Now, here at the Alf Museum, we have a lot of really cool and amazing fossils from throughout the world. And here in our Hall of Life, where we're kind of standing right now, they're all organized through the many different chapters of time. As paleontologists, it's our job to look at fossils, which are evidence of past life, and kind of reconstruct the story of life on Earth. Every time we get a fossil, that's a little piece of the story. They help us fill in characters, places, things that happened. All the bits and pieces of the story combine to create this whole entire saga of the life on Earth. So why don't we go through and check it out? We'll start over here at the very, very beginning of the story at the Precambrian. So here at the Precambrian, this is about 4.6 billion years to 542 million years ago. This is the biggest section, a biggest expanse of time in Earth history. It's about 90% of Earth's history. And actually for a lot of Earth's history, there wasn't any life on Earth. Life was pretty inhospitable. If you look at this picture over here, you can see that doesn't look like a place you'd want to vacation. There's lots of hot volcanoes. The air is toxic. The water is acidic and super salty and really, really hot. Nothing could really survive here. But actually, some things were able to find this a very hospitable place. These are some of the very, very first single-celled organisms, tiny little cells that are the origins of life on Earth. And over here, we kind of have an idea of what they sort of look like. If you look at these things on the floor, they kind of look like rocks. A lot of people think that they're benches for some reason. These are actually reconstructions of what we call stromatolites. Now, stromatolites are actually colonies of lots of tiny single-cell organisms that build right on top of each other. And if you look at this specimen up here, you see all these lines. Each one of those is a new layer of single-cell organisms. And these are some of the very first evidence of life on Earth. This fossil right here, this is actually 1.2 billion years old. And what's really cool about stromatolites is we actually still have them around today. This isn't a reconstruction in the image that you see behind the fossil. This is actually a photo taken pretty recently in Shark Bay in Australia. And the reason why stromatolites are still able to survive there is because Shark Bay is very salty. It's really hot. It's really inhospitable for lots of other life, except for stromatolites, because it resembles what life was like very early in Earth's history. Now, for a long time, life on Earth was pretty simple, very small single-cell organisms. But through time, these single organisms started to change, right? They started to become more complex. They started to become multicellular. And that leads us to the next chapter of life on Earth, the Paleozoic. The Paleozoic takes place 542 to 251 million years ago. And this is where we like to see things like the Cambrian explosion, the first appearance of armored animals, the first appearance of animals with legs, and the first appearance of plants and things like that. This is an amazing time in Earth's history when life was making lots of experiments and changing and adapting and going extinct, and new things were coming along. Some of my favorites over here are these things. These are called crinoids. Now, a lot of people will look at these and say, like, that's animal? They look like plants. And, you know, I wouldn't blame you. They do look a lot like plants. They've got like a stem. The top kind of looks like leaves or flowers. But these are actually a kind of animal. This is actually their body right here. And these are their arms that they use for filtering out food from the water. And they actually have their mouth and also their butt in the center of their body right here. It's the same place for them. And these are really, really, really cool animals. They're related to things like sea stars and sea urchins, and they're still around today in the very deep ocean. Over here, we've got something really cool. These are some of the very first evidence of complex life on the planet Earth. These are called trilobites. I'm sure a lot of people who like fossils have seen them before. They're really cool. They're arthropods. These are animals with exoskeletons and relatives of things like scorpions, roly-polies, spiders, crabs, lobsters, which are delicious. These are some of the really, really cool early ancestors of those shelled animals. And for those of you who might like things like Pokemon, trilobites are one of the inspirations for things like Kabuto and other kinds of fossil Pokemon. It just goes to show you that paleontology has a lot of influence in a lot of other places. Now, if we move over here, we've got a very, very special fossil. I want everybody to wave and say hello to great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother fish. This is Tiktaalik. Tiktaalik is a fossil that was discovered, and it was really, really important because it showed us evidence of some of the very first early tetrapods. Now, a tetrapod is any organism with 4 limbs. We're tetrapods, fish are tetrapods, lizards, monkeys, pigs, whales, we're all organisms that had 4 limbs. Now, Tiktaalik is one of the very first earliest evidence of that. If you look at its fossil right here, it looks like a fish, and it's still pretty much a fish, but its fins have adapted to support its weight out of water. So thanks to Tiktaalik, fish were able to adapt. All of its later ancestors and descendants had adapted to support their weight out of the water and move from water to land. And this led to a huge explosion of lots of different types of land animals. Things like amphibians right here. This is a giant amphibian. Thankfully, they're not around anymore because I would not want to go swimming with anything like this around. And also, these things started to adapt and evolve over time. One of the best things about paleontology is even though we find lots of cool fossils and we tell the story is always changing. As we discover new fossils, as we discover new pieces of evidence and the pieces of the story to fill in the gaps, the story becomes much more detailed and more clear. So in paleontology, we're always learning about so many new things as we move forward and discover new fossils. Now, at the end of the Paleozoic, there was a huge mass extinction. So much of Earth's life disappeared. About 75% of life on Earth and 90% of life in the ocean disappeared. And it was a very, very bad time for life on Earth. But luckily, some creatures were able to survive this mass extinction and move on and adapt and become some of the biggest, most amazing animals on planet Earth's history. And that is in the Mesozoic, the age of dinosaurs. But I like to call it the age of reptiles. That's a little bit more accurate, and I'll tell you why in just a second. So as we move into the Mesozoic, we'll see quite a few familiar faces for a lot of people, I'm sure. We've got things like ceratopsians, horned dinosaurs like Velociraptor here. We've got things like Pachycephalosaurus, the dome-headed dinosaur right here. Behind us, if I can get my mouse to go, there you go. We've got Velociraptor, a very, very famous dinosaur thanks to movies like Jurassic Park. Now, for a lot of people who've seen that movie or have seen images of Velociraptor, this is pretty familiar, kind of a scaly, scary-looking dinosaur thing. And if you've seen Jurassic Park, you might wonder, why is this smaller than the one in the movie? Well, the one in the movie, as cool and scary as it is actually just for the movie. It's made up. Velociraptors really weren't that big. There were some relatives of Velociraptors that were about that big, but not Velociraptor itself. Velociraptor was about the size of a large turkey, pretty much. And they weren't scaly like this. Thanks to a lot of new fossil evidence, we are now discovering that a lot of theropod dinosaurs, the two-legged dinosaurs that ate meat, were actually feathered. And this is kind of what we think Velociraptor looks like now. This was a piece of art created by one of our art interns here at the museum, Rob Soto, and he created this illustration of Velociraptor that's much more accurate to the way we think of things today. Excuse me. And so like I told you, as we're finding new evidence, we're finding new fossils, the story is changing. Even the characters in our stories change. Not too long ago, we thought this is what Velociraptor looked like, but now that we have new evidence, this is what Velociraptor looks like. As we move forward, we've got things like, actually, let's look at this thing really quick. You see this right here? You see how Velociraptor looks like a big bird? Well, that's not coincidence. That's because birds are actually a kind of dinosaur. So if you like things like, chicken nuggets, or if you eat turkey on Thanksgiving, you actually like eating dinosaur. I really love dinosaur, especially fried dinosaur. It's my favorite thing. But we have fossil evidence of really cool feathered dinosaurs that are starting to become birds, like Archaeopteryx, which is actually considered one of the earliest birds in the fossil record. Now, if we move forward some more, we look up here, we've got this really cool, huge dinosaur called Allosaurus. Allosaurus is a huge meat eater, really fast and agile. And actually, it looks like a T-Rex, but it's much older than a T-Rex. Allosaurus was around on Earth about 150 million years ago, compared to T-Rex, which is around 65 million years ago. Now, remember how I said this is the age of reptiles? Well, if we go over here, you can see some fossils that might look like dinosaurs, but these are actually their own group of marine reptile. These are not dinosaurs. This is a plesiosaur, right here. This is a marine reptile that had 4 flippers. Some of the biggest ones had really, really long necks. And over here, this is ichthyosaur, a fish lizard is what its name means. It looks a lot like a shark, or dolphins look a lot like them, but this is actually a reptile. So while dinosaurs ruled on land, marine reptiles ruled the oceans. And in the skies, actually, we had things like pterosaurs. So these right here are flying reptiles. So they're their own group of animal. And these are reptiles that were able to fly because they adapted their arms or their limbs to become wings. They extended this finger right here, and it became really long. And they got a membrane under it so that they could use that like a wing. Now, at the end of the Cretaceous, something really sad happened. We had an impact happen on Earth, a meteor or some sort of celestial object hit the Earth in Mexico at the Yucatan Peninsula, and that caused the extinction of the dinosaurs. Sorry, give me 1 second.
Take your time, Gabriel. While you're doing that, while you take that quick second, pterosaurs, I encourage everyone to look up something called Quetzalcoatlus. When they're done this program, I'll put it up in the chat bar too for people to check out. It's like the coolest flying thing of all time. One of my favorite creatures in the fossil record. Gabriel, are we good to go?
Yeah, we're good to go.
Awesome, man.
So at the end of the age of dinosaurs, 65 million years ago, we had something bad happen. A meteor or some sort of celestial object hit the Earth, and that caused the extinction of the dinosaurs. But thankfully, even though the large dinosaurs disappeared, some other groups of animals were able to survive that mass extinction and go into today. Those were the mammals, and that leads us into the Cenozoic. This is the age of mammals, and this is the age we're in today. We've got lots of really cool animals in here, things like brontotheres, which are these big thunder beasts, as we call them, relatives of rhinos. You've got mammoths and mastodons. You've got things like saber-toothed cats and camels. And one of my favorites actually is not here in the museum, but here in the collection with me. This is called a Desmostillion. Jesse, can you switch my camera really quick? Thank you. So this is called a Desmostillion tooth. If you can kind of see that, Desmostillions are these really cool marine mammals that look like a hippo with a really, really long face and could be about the size of an elephant. And they've got these really weird teeth that kind of look like a bunch of sushi rolls all stuck together. And these are some of my favorite animals. And these were actually the animals that I studied as a paleontologist. I look at their teeth and kind of figure out how they change from baby to an adult, because if you look at a baby Desmostillion teeth, it's really, really tiny. I can get that to focus, compared to an adult, which is much, much bigger. So I study animals like this. And so that is kind of what we do as paleontologists at the Alf Museum. We look at fossils and we try to reconstruct the story of life on Earth. And here in the collection is actually where we store most of our fossils. In a museum exhibit, that's only a very small part of any museum's collection. The majority of our fossil collections are kept in places like this. We've got these really cool cabinets where we store our fossils, and we're kept in a temperature and environmentally controlled area so that the fossils will preserve and they don't break down over time. Sorry, give me 1 second. When we say environmentally controlled, we also control the humidity in the museum collections. That means how much moisture is in the air, because moisture can be pretty bad for fossils, and sometimes it dries out my throat, so I need to drink water right now. But yeah, here in the museum collection, as collections paleontologists, it's our job to take care of fossils. That includes bringing fossils on display for people to see, bringing them for educational programs like this, and also getting them ready for other paleontologists to come and visit and research them. When we find fossils in the field, they're not as pretty like this when we get them. A lot of times we only find a very, very tiny portion like that exposed in the rocks, or the matrix is what we call the rocks that surround fossils. So when we're out in the field and we find a little bit of a fossil, we do our best to remove as much of the matrix as we can, but we leave some of it on so that we can protect the fossil, so that when we bring it to our museum, we can remove more of the matrix and get it ready for research to go in our collection so that we can preserve them and study them. And we also do a lot of things called curation. All of our fossils, we don't just put them in our cabinets. All of our fossils have to be organized in a certain way so that it's easy for other paleontologists and us to find them. Let's say somebody came to the museum and wanted to find all the Desmostillions. Instead of us having to go to a lot of different cabinets, what we do is give all of our fossil specimens a special number in a computer, kind of like a library database. Like how every library book you can find by typing in the computer. It's the same thing with our fossils. Every fossil has a unique number and it has a unique place in our collections. Like our Desmostillions are in this cabinet over here. And that lets us, when somebody comes over, we can type in Desmostillion in our computer and we can come to the cabinet that it tells us to. We can pull them out and let other people see them. And then when they're done, we know exactly where they need to go. It helps make things a lot easier, and it helps make science go that much better when we have these amazing organized collections. So that's kind of what museums are for, right? So we tell the story of life on Earth as paleontologists. We look at fossils to as evidence to reconstruct the story. We use museums as a way to preserve and study fossils for future generations as well. So that's kind of what we do here at the museum. I'm really glad I got to show you some really cool fossils, a little bit of our museum. And now I think I'm ready to take some questions. Oh, really quick though, if you like that virtual museum, you can go onto our website at alfmuseum.org and you can tour the museum yourself. It's free to use. You just click on that link and you can explore the museum, see all the really cool fossils we have. And if you want a special tour for your classroom, we do that as well. So if you want to learn more about our fossils, just sign up on there and we're happy to set up a tour for you.
Fantastic. I mean, these are just a sneak peek of some of the amazing stuff that you guys do, and you were such an awesome tour guide with us today. But truly, if classes want to learn more, they can check out things themselves. If you want the ultimate guided experience with Gabriel, as you got a chance to hear today, some really, really neat information that you otherwise never get the chance to learn. So do check that out. Alfmuseum.org is the broader site. So if you want to check out all the work that they do there in LA, some really, really neat stuff. Guys, let's get ready to dive in. Whatever your questions are about the ancient world, fossils, dinosaurs, all these amazing eras and the history of life on Earth, I'm so excited to dive in. So if you guys don't have questions, I'm going to have a whole bunch. If you're joining us on YouTube too, feel free to share in the chat bar and we'll take as many as we can. But for now, we are going to go right down the Pacific Coast to Ms. Becker's class in San Diego. You guys want to kick us off with a question? Come on in. Hey, Ms. Becker.
Hi, Gabriel. It's nice to see you and everybody this year. My question, and then I'll let my students ask questions later. How did you get started? You're young. What did you do in school? How did you progress to where you are now? Thank you.
That's a great question, and thank you for thinking I look younger than I am. I started actually not as a paleontologist. I'm one of the few ones who didn't want to be a paleontologist all my life. I actually started as a pre-med. I studied human biology, human anatomy, and general biological sciences at UC Irvine. And I just realized that wasn't for me. And so I took a couple years off, tried to figure out, find myself, as they say. And then eventually I discovered paleontology. I went to the American Museum of Natural History, and they have an amazing exhibit up there called Paraceratherium. It's a giant rhino, also known as Indricotherium. And I stood under there for like maybe 15 minutes, just in awe of this huge, amazing giant rhino. It's like a rhino as big as a giraffe, taller than a giraffe. And I wondered, like, who found that? Somebody had discovered that, someone had to talk about it, someone had to build the exhibit. And that's what I realized I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to tell people about, life on Earth and get people inspired about all the really cool stories of history, prehistory. And so I eventually decided to become a paleontologist. I came back to California and I eventually got my master's in Cal State Fullerton in geology and paleontology. And while I was there, I started working here at the Alf Museum. So I am currently in my 7th year at the Alf Museum. And while doing all of that, I did research. I studied Desmostillions and other marine mammals. I studied things of how to teach better, how to tell stories. And I also did fun things, like Jesse said. I started Cosplay for Science, where we use cosplay to talk about natural history in pop culture and things like that. So I've built up a lot of skills along the way, from videography and graphic design and storytelling and fossil preparation and things like that to kind of get to where I am today.
Yeah. What a fantastic answer. Again, I brought up some of the things, and I'll be sharing those links again at the end of the broadcast. But Gabriel's really one of the most diverse people we will bring on this broadcast. He does so much in so many different fields, and you are still young. Don't short trip yourself. But yeah, like, this is the coolest thing about this job. When I was a kid, I had like a cabinet of curiosities. I had bones and feathers and things that I found. And if you end up with a job like Gabriel's, you get to work and help showcase the ultimate cabinet of curiosities in museums, science centers, all these amazing facilities around the world. So if you're one of these classes and you're like super hyped about anything, whether it's fossils or sports or art, whatever, keep that passion up, because you can end up with one of the coolest jobs in the whole world. So thanks, Ms. Becker, for that great question to kick us off. And Mr. Shattuck's class in Chalk River, Ontario, if you guys want to keep the fun going, come on up.
I want to know, do you think that you documented all the dragons, or at least most of them?
Sorry, could you repeat your question 1 second?
Yeah, is it dinosaurs or like have we found dragons? Is that the question, or is it have we documented all the dinosaurs that are out there?
Documented all the dinosaurs.
Perfect.
Oh, okay. Actually, no. So what's really cool about paleontology is that the fossil record is incomplete. Not every single organism that ever existed has ever fossilized. Fossilization is a very, very rare event. So from just that part alone, we're never going to find every single dinosaur, every single fossil animal or organism that ever existed. And also, because fossilization is so rare, we're never going to be able to find every single thing, or not, because fossilization is so rare. And also beyond that, fossils break down over time. There's a thing called taphonomy. It's what happens to something after it dies. And we look at that. And so even after something fossilizes, they can break down over time. They can weather out of the rocks before somebody even finds it. So there are going to be a lot of really cool organisms and dinosaurs that we're never going to be able to see. But that doesn't mean we can't keep trying. With whatever piece of evidence we find, that's another piece of the story that we can get to life on Earth. Now, really quick, the thing about dragons, what's really cool is some people think that the myth of dragons was ancient cultures finding dinosaur fossils and trying to explain that. Dragons may have been the very first explanation in written history of what dinosaurs were. They found these huge giant reptiles that they had no idea what they were. So they explained them with the story of dragons.
I absolutely love that you took the opportunity to segue that back to dragons. I appreciate you so much. All right, Ms. Anderson's class, joining us high schoolers in Milton, Ontario. If you guys want to come on up, go for it. And then we'll head to Ms. Peel for our last of our live groups before we do another round.
Okay, so our question would be, what would be your favorite part of your job and the least favorite part of your job as a paleontologist?
My favorite part of the job, I would say, is I'm gonna give two answers if that's cheating a little bit. But the first part of my job is I get to come into the museum and I kind of get to learn something new every day. Whenever we're in the collection, we can pull out a drawer and see something, that hadn't been seen by people in over 50 years. When we're in this field and we find a fossil never before seen by human eyes, and we're the first people to do that, that is so cool and exciting. And if there's a fossil that I don't know what it is, I can go do research about it, study it, and learn something new. It's really cool because there are every fossil is worth a million stories, right? And there are millions and millions of fossils out there. So there's so much we can learn about life on Earth that it's just so fascinating. There's something new I can learn every day that I never knew about. The second part is I get to work with some really amazing people. I come to work every day with some of my best friends, and we get to laugh and have fun and talk about, paleontology and just learn about new things all the time. So that's really cool because it's amazing to work in a really cool museum with awesome people. My least favorite thing about being a paleontologist, I would say it's paperwork, but honestly, I do like paperwork. So I'm gonna say, I don't like getting hot and sweaty. So sometimes we're in the field, I get really hot and sweaty and I'm really uncomfortable. So that's probably my least favorite thing.
It's terrible when you have to go to those awesome field sites and look for dinosaurs and stuff, and it's just a little too hot outside. We should all try and avoid that for a gig. Very cool, Gabriel. Thank you so much for that. And I'm really glad we always get that sort of question from high school students. I mean, these are people that might be doing this sort of career in a few years, a bunch of schooling to go after you're done high school. But again, 6-7 years of school after you're done high school seems foreboding when you're 17 or 18 years old, but it means you're really young and you get a job that you absolutely love for the rest of your entire life. You get to work with your friends, you get to work with amazing people around the world, which is a pretty neat thing and opportunity to have. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it can seem daunting, when you're in high school and all of a sudden you're trying to plan out your undergraduate degree and then think about a master's or a PhD. That seems like a long amount of time, but honestly, it goes by so fast, so much faster than you think it does. And also, when you're studying paleontology, when you're working in millions and billions of years, sometimes 4 years is just a quick moment of time.
The geological timescale scientific perspective. I love it. Miss Peel, we're going to go to Chicago Ridge, Illinois, and then we'll take a few questions from our YouTube teachers. We have some really, really keen YouTube teachers today, Gabriel. This is great. But Miss Peel, come on in and take us away.
So what would be your advice for students who think like science is boring? Because we ask the questions like, what do you want to be when you get older? And not many students kind of think about being a scientist. So what would be your advice that to help kids think that science is not boring?
That's a great question because, there are some times where I thought science was boring too. I love biological sciences, but math was not great for me. I used to think chemistry was kind of boring, but then, as I got older, I learned a lot about how science is in places that you wouldn't expect. So a way to do that is to have people realize science in their everyday lives and interests. And that's how we can find science relatable and something that they can find interest in. When we do cosplay for science, we show people where science exists in their favorite comic books and movies and TV shows. If somebody is bored with chemistry, there's a really cool anime called Full Metal Alchemist, where they're alchemists, right? Alchemy is the original chemistry. It's, we don't do alchemy because, it's not real. But with chemistry, that's where you can see the connections and learning about the different types of molecules and atoms that make up a human, from carbon to oxygen and things like that. And then there are connections there that people can make and find interest. For paleontology, we're kind of lucky because dinosaurs are just pretty much like pretty easy to get obsessed with. But there are a lot of cool things. Like, I love Star Wars so much, and so much of the world of Star Wars was inspired by our real world, right? Things like tauntauns. Their biology comes from looking at alpine animals that have to exist in really cold environments. If you look at a tauntaun, they have really, really wide noses. And our real world animals, like mountain goats, have really wide noses too, so that they can warm the air before they breathe into their lungs. And so whoever was creating the tauntaun saw that and like, I need to create an animal that survives in an ice planet. Well, let's give them adaptations that animals have on Earth to make them more realistic in the world of Star Wars. And from even their spaceships to lightsabers, there are really cool ways to connect science to all parts of life. So that's my advice, is finding ways to connect things that you wouldn't think science has a part of.
Yeah, that's a beautiful answer. My lightsaber is just in another room. I'll stay with the broadcast here too, but Star Wars is awesome. I think too, for a lot of teachers, a lot of students assume, okay, if I like science, I want to become a scientist. The world needs all sorts of people. You don't need to be a scientist to love science and to recognize the value of it. And you guys are growing up in a world where science underpins so much of what's happening in your life. COVID, the push to create a vaccine in a year and a bit that has been rolled out around the world and saved hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives, is one of the greatest scientific accomplishments ever. So you can recognize that, and the talent and the skill and the ingenuity that went into that. Climate change is one of the biggest issues that you guys are growing up with, happening on a much faster timescale than we ever thought possible when we were kids. And so it'll take scientific minds and people that just recognize the value of it to really live in this world to come. And I think that's a really exciting thing. Science is the greatest story ever told. We got a chance to explore that today with Gabriel, but it's just so much fun. It's so neat.
Can I add something to that, Jesse?
Please.
It even can go beyond that. Like, let's say you want to be an artist, right? Think about if you want to be a painter. Think about the science of the paint, right? How does like something that's liquid dry to become this thing that can look pretty, right? How do we see color? How does colors affect the way that we feel by looking at a painting? There's things like color theory and all that stuff with photography, art, even music. There are different types of frequencies of music that have us feel different ways and can connect to people. So science can exist in so many different aspects, from trying to build a building to creating to being a DJ. There's the technology that involved in there, creating different sounds, combining them. There's all science there and all different types of jobs you want to become. You don't have to be a scientist to do those, but you can think like a scientist to enhance your job that way.
I think Gabriel and I could nerd out on this question all day long, but I'll spare you. So I'll take us some questions from YouTube and then we'll go back to all our live classes. We've got Miss Roop's class joining us in Alberta. We got a bunch of Alberta classes today, which is really exciting. So they had so many questions. What do we want to share? How long does it take to dig up a fossil, Gabriel?
Great question. It depends. So when you find a fossil, you kind of want to evaluate it to look at, one, how big it could be, and then how how preserved it is. If a fossil is really, really delicate, sometimes it might take one session or multiple field seasons to get that fossil out. If it's a huge, complete, beautiful specimen, then yeah, that can take many, many years to carefully excavating out the matrix, trenching it out where we dig kind of the matrix out from around it and underneath it so that we can jacket it with the plaster jacket so that we can transport it. So it can take anywhere from a couple hours all the way to a few years, depending on the kind of fossil. And that's only excavating it. Once we get into the museum, sometimes it can take years as well to prepare it.
Yeah. This is an excellent follow-up question to that. Mr. Till's class wants to know, what's the biggest fossil you've ever found? So like for something huge, what have you discovered personally?
For me, the biggest fossil I ever found, I actually haven't found very large fossils myself. I haven't been out in the field that much, but when I was in South America in Peru, I was out with some paleontologists looking for whales, and I was able to help find a whale skull that was about maybe like that big, so maybe 2.5 feet, just sticking out of the ground. It was so cool, and because I love marine mammals, I was just having a really, really good day. I took tons of selfies with that fossil.
Perfect. There's supposed to be time for excavation, but there's Gabriel like, no, man, one more angle. The sun's hitting it just right. We're going to come back to our live groups in just a minute. We're whipping through these questions. This is awesome. I want to take 2 more quick ones from our folks on YouTube. So Miss Barge wants to know, are all birds descended from dinosaurs?
Yes, all birds are descended from dinosaurs. So birds are descendant from the theropod dinosaurs. So the theropod dinosaurs are the ones that are like Velociraptor, T-Rex, the 2-legged meat-eating dinosaurs. And from within that branch of the theropods, another branch came off that became the birds. So they're all a kind of cool group of dinosaurs within themselves. And they've differentiated and varied all different kinds of ways since they branched off from that main theropod line.
It's really cool. We've got a whole bunch of questions on YouTube about the bird-dinosaur connection. And I can tell you, when I was a kid, this was something that like some scientists were starting to talk about, but really wasn't in the public eye, and it's slowly come out over the years. It is the coolest time to be interested in fossils and dinosaurs, bar none. There's more investment in it. There's more cool things being found. It's such an exciting time for everybody. I want to share this question from Miss Ramirez, right down the hall from Miss Peel in Chicago or Regional, Illinois. Let's bring this question in, and I'll get a fossil of my own while we're talking about this. Do you have any shark fossils or shark dinosaurs, sort of like maybe like this Megalodon tooth, Gabriel?
We do. We have a lot of really cool shark fossils here in the museum. Some are pretty old, and some are from not too long ago from the Miocene. I actually think I'm right next to.
That's what I love about museums. You can just like wheel back.
There you go. Awesome. So right behind me is the Miocene, and this is a Carparacles Megalodon tooth. This is one of the largest sharks to ever exist. It's about the size of a school bus, and you can see it's just like Jesse's. These are really, really big shark teeth. But we've got some from the age of dinosaurs. We've got some from even before the dinosaurs, and we're still finding them. Sharks are so very, very common teeth in the fossil record because they're constantly shedding their teeth. They're regrowing it too. So we've got lots of really cool sharks in the fossil record.
I'm putting my tooth away because yours is better than mine. But I want to encourage all our kids, when you're done this broadcast, honestly, there's so much you can look up. Helicoprion, if you want to pronounce it that way. Coolest, freakiest thing ever. You'd never believe this is a real creature unless you saw that it's an actual fossil. So look that up look that up wherever my finger should go. When you're done the broadcast, it's amazing. Will blow your mind. All right. Miss Becker, back to San Diego. Let's do one more round with our live groups, and we'll wrap up from there. Come on in, guys.
My question is, how many fossils have you found?
Well, how many fossils have I found personally? Not that many. I can probably say I've helped find like 20 fossils by myself. But here in the museum, we have about 190,000 specimens in our collection. I'm only in one aisle. And just you can only see a few cabinets, but this aisle goes all the way down there, and we've got 6 more aisles here in the museum. So we have 190,000 specimens, and we're actually kind of a small museum. Some museums have millions of fossils in their collection.
I love this question because it segues into something that I think every kid can and should do. So Gabriel gets the opportunity to go to places that have wild, cool, giant whale skulls popping out of the ground and check out dinosaurs. And that is super, super neat. Don't get me wrong. It's the coolest thing you can do in the fossil world. But I was in Toronto up until about a year ago, and you can literally go to streams in the heart of a major city, crack open rocks, and see trilobite fossils. And so wherever you are joining from around the world, there are fossils likely near you in some form of rock. So find that out. You can look up local fossils and go and crack these things open. And again, this idea that Gabriel shared, you're the first person to see that ever. If you crack open a rock and there's a trilobite in there, that's been encased in that rock for hundreds of millions of years, and you're the first first person to lay eyes on it. That's mind-blowing. It's like the coolest thing ever. Anyway, go ahead.
Really quick, so for that, it's really cool to be able to go out and find your own fossils. But I will also say, especially for those who are in the United States, make sure you look up where it's okay to collect fossils.
Yes.
There are a lot of laws out there that say, you can only collect invertebrate or plant specimens. If you find vertebrate specimens, things with a backbone, you actually have to have a permit to collect that. If you're on public land, you can't just collect fossils wherever you want. You have to make sure that you are doing the research to ethically collect fossils and follow the law. And there's really cool websites, like Jesse said. My favorite one is myfossil.org, and it's a great place to go look and see if you can where you can collect fossils in your local area, and make sure you're doing it the right way as well. And my advice, if you find a fossil on accident, leave it alone, take a photo, write down where you were, and then email or contact your local museum or national park, and they will help you let you know if it's okay to pick it up, or you could help them eventually pick it up, and you can become part of the cool process in collecting a really cool specimen.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. One thing that's true too of a lot of museums, certainly we have Alberta fans today. I know they do this out in the Badlands, is museums will organize tours where people can go and go out into these amazing fossil sites. So that's something where you can have that guided experience. It's much more enriching anyway. So thank you very much for continuing that on. Mr. Shattuck's group, let's come on in and a question for us.
How do you find these fossil areas where you find fossils?
Yeah, so Gabriel's connection actually just cut out for a second, so we're hopefully going to get him back in a minute. I can speak to this just a little bit. One of the things is that you can look for ages of rock. So if you're looking for dinosaurs existed during a very certain band of time, and you can look for rocks that are that age to go look for prospective fossil sites. A lot of fossil sites were found by accident. People stumbled upon them. People saw a lot of fossils, and they become big scientific areas. And now Gabriel's back to answer that question a little bit better. So the question was, welcome back. How do you find fossil sites? Like, where do you go about to find these places to begin with?
Great question. Sorry about that. For some reason, my computer went off for a second. So finding fossils. Well, the first thing you need to make sure that you're doing is you're in the right kind of rock. You can't find fossils in every rock. There are three main types of rocks: sedimentary, metamorphic, and igneous. Igneous rocks are basically from magma and lava. If anything dies in that, they're not gonna probably fossilize because they'll probably be burnt up and melted. Metamorphic rock is sedimentary rock that's been compressed and shifted and stretched over time. So anything that's in there most likely has broken and kind of gone away. So if you're in sedimentary rock, that's rock made up of lots of other broken down rock over time that's built up in different layers. That's the best place to find rock. So sandstones, limestones, things like that. And then you want to go find somewhere where the rocks are exposed. So if you go somewhere out in the desert or somewhere in the mountains, especially after it rains, in riverbeds, but you gotta be careful. Those are the best places where you can find fossils eroding out of the cliffside or the riverbank, things like that. Those are really, really cool places to find them. So you want to make sure you're in the right type of rock and the right kind of area. Sometimes you can find fossils in really weird places, like here in Los Angeles. We find them under the streets in the La Brea tar pits. Not exactly the safest place to go collecting, but you never know. So as long as you're in the right kind of rock, you'll find fossils. But again, make sure you go online, find the right place to find them, and if it's okay to collect them there.
Yeah. A really, really great book exists that I read about the age of some of our grade 11s today. Your Inner Fish, about the story of Tiktaalik. We saw Tiktaalik earlier. It's one of the coolest animals in the world ever, and it's one of the coolest stories of how they went about going to find it. It's such a narrow band of time that this creature existed in that they looked for fossils all around the world. There were like 3 main sites that they went to look for, and it's just an unbelievable tale. Do check out that book if you're a little bit older. It's very, very neat. All right, Gabriel, time flies and you're having fun. We've got time for 2 more questions from our live groups. Miss Anderson first, and we'll wrap up with Miss Peel in just a minute. Come on in, Miss Anderson.
Hi. So we were wondering what fossil discovery has made the biggest change in scientific thinking, would you say?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it kind of depends on what you're researching, right? So for some people, I would say that finding a specimen like Lucy, the ancient human in Africa, that changed the way that we learned about our evolution, our story, right? So that was a huge, huge thing. The discovery of Archaeopteryx, the feathered dinosaur, that helped us bridge that connection between dinosaurs and birds. So I actually don't think there's one specimen that changed everything in paleontology. Like I said, every single thing that we find is a piece of evidence, that's a piece of the story that helps us complete that great saga of life on Earth. I might have copped out of that question a little bit, but that's my answer.
Listen, I love that you brought up Lucy. I really encourage people to check that out. It's an amazing fossil. Archaeopteryx, you showed us this beautiful version of earlier. What an amazing and incredible creature. And for me, those are 2 of the fossils that really inspired me to be interested in paleontology as a boy. So hopefully our students today have that same experience. All right, Miss Peel, wrap us up with one more question. Demute that mic and you're good to go.
All right, go ahead.
How do you know if the fossils you've seen belongs to the other fossil?
Great question. So how do I know if one fossil we find connects or is part of another specimen? Usually when we find fossils in the ground, if they're found right next to each other, that lets us know that they are associated with each other, right? That lets us know that they are somehow connected. They may not be from the same animal, but we can kind of guess that because they're so close to each other in the rock, that they probably came from the same animal. Now, sometimes, in very rare cases, we can find complete animals all put together, their skeleton in the right place and the right joints. That definitely lets us know that it's all part of one animal. Sometimes when you're excavating fossils, you can only find just a tiny bit, like the hand. And as you prepare more of it, you'll find the arm, you'll find the rest of the body and realize you've got a complete skeleton. So it depends on where we find the specimens and like how close they are. On very, very rare occasions, you can find a specimen that's weathered out, that's on the ground. You can follow it back, kind of where the things were weathering out of, and in the cliff or like on the rock. You can find the rest of it sometimes and piece it back together. It's very rare, but it does happen where we can find things that are separated and then we can put them back.
I was building up a banner because I want to highlight this for people. The coolest fossil example ever, probably in history, of like a complete specimen or multiple at once. There's a fight that was found in a fossil, Velociraptor and Protoceratops. It's the most metal thing you'll ever see ever. Like the fact that this actually fossilized is mind-blowing beyond all possible recognition. Look up those 2 dinosaurs. You will inevitably find pictures of the fossil. Another one that's more recent, Borealopelta, is a So something with like a huge club tail. The Borealopelta fossil they found, I guess, 2-3 years ago now, is the most unbelievable dino fossil ever. Like it looks fake. It's ridiculous. So again,
I got to see that. It was amazing. It's like it's just frozen right there in time. It's one of my favorite fossils I've ever seen.
I'm going to put that back up on the screen for a minute. Write that down. Teachers, check that out when you're done. Gabe, this has been so much fun. What I want to do is highlight a few things that you are up to that people can check out when they're done this broadcast. Again, Gabe is at the Alf Museum, alfmuseum.org. Amazing stuff. All sorts of great educational resources. If you want to go on a personal virtual tour of their exhibits, check out the link below. And of course, if you want to contact the team there and arrange something more in depth, diving in on any topic you're keen on, I'm absolutely thrilled to put you in touch if you're so inclined. And if you want to check out other work that he's up to, something that we might do in a future broadcast together, cosplayforscience.com. Such a cool initiative. Again, Gabriel's got the coolest gigs in the world, and it's been such a thrill having you with us today. Before we do our big thank you and goodbye, is there one last message you want to leave for all the kids today about the fossil world or anything that you get to do personally?
Yeah, I would say that remember that you yourself, even though, we're looking at fossils and, we talk about the past and all these parts of science, don't forget that you yourself are a part of the world. We like to separate things in time and different subjects, but everything is connected. So all the choices that you make in science or whatever, everything is connected, and you have an effect on the world around you. And that can help with either planting plants for butterflies and wildlife, or helping paleontologists find fossils. Every action that you make can help us learn more and protect our world for the future. So remember to ask yourself, like, what will you do with your moment of time here on the little time that we're here on Earth? That's a great way to kind of figure out what you can do and help everything around you.
Yeah, that's a beautiful message. What a fun program. I had such a good time with this. What I want to do and what we do at the end of every broadcast is I'm going to bring in all our classes. So Ms. Becker's class, Mr. Shattuck, Miss Anderson, Miss Field, if you guys want to join me in saying a big thank you.